Whew. Eseneziri. I create languages for a living, and often people ask me, what exactly is entailed in creating a language? Well, potentially, it could be as simple as this. You start right here, and then you just basically open that bad boy up and start coining words for every single possible entry. So assuming you got as far as the O's, you might decide that the new word for oscillation is glurm, and the new word for octagon is yarlo, the new word for octave is belkug, and since they're really cute and cuddly, the new word for ocelot is girmalionian, or something like that. Anyway, once you had enough of these words, you could put together sentences like this one, min pilu sarti gep min girmalioniani, which means, word for word, the child plays with the ocelots. And of course, if you wanted to be clever, you could take this suffix here that corresponds to the S in English and move it to the front of the word, and after you've done that, you will have created the most obnoxious way to speak the English language ever. So anyway, what's wrong with this? Potentially nothing. If you just wanted a secret way of speaking English, that's fine. That'll do. It all depends on the goals that one sets for oneself in creating a language. One such goal in the modern era of language creation, or conlanging, remember that term, is naturalism. A naturalistic language is one that attempts as nearly as possible to imitate the quirks and idiosyncrasies of natural language. In order to do that, conlangers have learned a lot from historical linguistics and linguistic typology and Pidgin and Creole languages. See, languages, what they do is they change over a long period of time in the mouths of billions and billions of speakers. And what we have to do when we're creating a naturalistic language is emulate that evolution. And here's an example of the type of evolution I'm talking about. The following quote comes from the Morte d'Arthur by Thomas Mallory, written in English in the 15th century. Here, I'll read it for you. And thereupon Isolde fell down in a swoon, and solely a great while. And when she might speak, she said, but no spoilers, you gotta go read it. Anyway, I want to draw your attention to the word might there. It doesn't mean quite what it does nowadays. Now it means kind of like be allowed to. What it means here, though, is really was able to. That is, she fell down, she fainted, and when she was able to speak, when she had the physical capacity to speak, she spoke, right? Well, it turns out that's actually what that word used to mean. So starting way back in Proto-Indo-European, we have this word mar, which meant to have power or to be powerful. And as the language evolved into Proto-Germanic, we got this word maganan, which means to be able to, much like our word can does nowadays. But as the evolution kept going, we got may, which means be allowed to, with can taking over the former function that may had. But of course, this is basically what languages do. The meanings drift bit by bit. New speakers reanalyze old forms of a language, and they kind of change, and you produce a brand new version. The artistry of naturalistic language creation comes in simulating and guiding this evolution to produce naturalistic but novel results. So here's an example of what you could do with just 2 words. So here's this language that's got nothing else, it just has these 2 words, eat and sit. Well, one thing you could do, even with just those 2 words, you could introduce sequentiality. So you could have, for example, eat versus sit and eat. And if the latter construction got used over a long period of time, it might grammaticalize a little bit and produce something like being in the process of eating and having just finished eating. And then a couple of sound changes later, pretty soon you have the beginning of a verbal paradigm, one that distinguishes what we call the perfective versus the imperfective aspect. If you go into the lexicon, you can have even more fun with the language. In Castithan, a language I developed for sci-fi's Defiance, I used linguistic evolution as a characterization tool, as a way of basically giving insight into the history of the speakers. So for example, we have these 2 words that mean to fail and to raise in the modern version of the language. They actually derive from older words that mean to try and to repair. Focusing on just the first one, chevalu. The idea of trying something allows for the possibility of failure. For example, I'm going to try to get this talk under 6 minutes, and I'm going to fail miserably. So it's licit. You could say that you could try something and then fail. You can't say, I accomplished it, but I failed to do so. It doesn't make any sense. So what happened was, as this word was used over the centuries, the idea of try became de-emphasized in this lexeme until eventually it was just replaced entirely, and all that was left in its wake was failure. In Dothraki, a language I developed for HBO's Game of Thrones, I used different conceptual metaphors from what an English-speaking viewer might be used to. For example, trees are conceptualized as torsos being buried in the soil. So with that idea, the great big leafy part of the tree is the head. That is, it's the same word for head in Dothraki is used for that leafy part of the tree, which means, of course, that the trunk is not a metaphor for the body, but the neck. Right? And of course, the throat of the tree produces, like, I don't even know if we have a word for this in English, but it's the middle, the inside of the trunk, right? And then, of course, everything below ground, the root system of the tree is the lungs. Anyway, so why go to all this trouble when relexifying the English language would be so simple? More and more, I think the entertainment industry has an answer. Films and television shows are being analyzed by legions of fans the world over now and in real time. Every single detail of a production is analyzed in depth by amateurs and experts alike. And the results are shared instantaneously. Let me show you just a quick example. This is my wife, Erin, sitting on the Iron Throne from Game of Thrones. And you know, it looks pretty great from far back, and it looks great on screen. If you get up close, though, it's easy to see that it's fake. But that doesn't matter. The greatest level of interaction that a fan will ever have with this object is seeing it on screen. Well, what about a language, though? A language never gets more real than when we speak it. If it's used in a television show or a film, anybody can sit there, write down what's said, and analyze it to see if it's systematic or if it's just gibberish. Imagine if, like, you could pause a show, step into a scene, and actually touch the Iron Throne to see if it's actually made out of melted swords or not. That's basically what we have with language. Unfortunately, there is no stage version of a language. To create an authentic sounding language, one needs to employ an authentic methodology. Thank you.